You tuned in live to Credible Conversations podcast.
Hey everybody, I'm Angela Rye. I'm here with Northwest Credible Messengers having a credible conversation with some incredible people.
AKEEMali is who I be, also known as Kimi Casanova, and I want you to bring your asses over to listen to me have a credible conversation with Northwest Credible Messengers.
Hey, my name is D Smoke. I'm from Inglewood, California, and you are watching Credible Conversations.
Let's go! I'm Dr. Timmie Foster, and this is the Credible Conversation panel brought to you by Northwest Credible Messengers. You are tuning in now to the Credible Conversations, and we have Brian Gatewood with Innovative Changemakers. We have Jackson with Innovative Changemakers. We have little Miss Flint, Mari Copeny, and I'll read your bio in a second, as our special guest on this conversation. And we have Jerome Foster II. I'll read your bio as well on the second half of this piece as well. But again, thank you so much, our studio audience, for tapping into the Credible Conversations brought to you by Northwest Credible Messengers. I'm Dr. Timmie Foster, and you are tuning in to Credible Conversations.
Second, guys, sorry.
We practiced it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Gatewood Jr., and I'm a peer mentor with Innovative Changemakers, and you're watching Credible Conversations.
My name is Jerome Foster. I'm a tree equity ambassador at American Forest and a climate activist, and we're here with Credible Conversations.
I'm Mari Copeny, aka Little Miss Flint, and yours happened in the Credible Conversations. Hi, I'm Mari Copeny, aka Little Miss Flint, and yours happened in the Credible Conversations.
I'm Jackson Rowland. I'm a peer mentor with ICM, and you're watching Credible Conversations.
Okay, so our roles here, I'm Dr. Timmie Foster, I'm moderating, but my co-moderators and my co-hosts will be the two youth from Innovative Changemakers. They got some amazing questions lined up for our special guest, and then I'll thoroughly introduce our special guest. So Mari Copeny, thank you. Mari Copeny, known from her pageant title, Little Miss Flint, is a prominent American youth activist and philanthropist. Mari became a vocal advocate for her hometown, Flint, Michigan, at a young age when the city's water supply was contaminated with lead. Early activism and impact. At 6 years old, Mari's activism gained national attention after she wrote a letter to President Obama about the Flint Water Crisis, leading to his visit to the city and allocation of federal funds to water system repairs. She has also played a key role in mobilizing young people for activism, including raising over $700,000 for community projects and launching a successful water filter initiative. Mari's work has been recognized with numerous accolades, including the Changemaker Award at the Billboard Music Awards. Mari Little Flint Copeny. Jerome Foster II is a climate and environmental justice activist. He is the youngest ever White House advisor in United States history as a member of the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council within the Biden administration. Jerome creates social and environmental change through art, technology, and policy. He studies environmental governance and policy and social justice at Harvard University and computer science at Pace University. He is the curator at the Smithsonian National Museum of Asian Art. He is also the youngest ever, we mentioned, White House Environmental Justice Advisor, but advised President Biden in developing policies on climate change, environmental justice, and federal sustainability. Jerome is driven by the promise of a world which lives by the ideas of economy, economics, social, and environmental reciprocity and equality. Give it up for Jerome.
So we got a couple questions for you today. I'll start off. What made you want to speak up about the environment?
I can start. So I first got involved in the environment because I was born and raised in a family that was active in the civil rights movement. My father was a volunteer for the Million Man March, getting folks out to Washington, D.C. And from a very young age, I was taught that civil rights are, in the past, just an extension of the work that we continue to do, and that legacy that we continue on through generations is something that we do through the environmental movement, through the movement for Black Lives Matter today. And that's the reason why I got involved. I started as an activist outside the White House for 80 weeks, holding a sign saying that I speak for that which cannot speak against those who do unspeakable things, against the Trump administration. And it's because for all the communities that for hundreds of years have not been recognized and been pushed to the margins, it's about environmentalism as one entry for us to be able to be a part of that conversation. And being a young person, using my voice, and being one person holding a sign to kickstarting a movement of millions of young people across the world, where we led the movement alongside Greta Thunberg, alongside other young people from the African continent, from the Asian continent, the European continent, all with one key message: that we deserve clean air, we deserve clean water, and we deserve to be able to have a community that doesn't have to, generation after generation, fight for basic human rights and basic human dignity. And that's what environmental justice is about. It's not just about those ideas that we can go out to a national park and send our kids to those things, but also saying where we live, where we play, where we work, those should all be things that should not be heavied by pollution burden. They shouldn't be heavied by proximity to petrochemical plants. They shouldn't be heavied by the fact that over decades of redlining, we're now seeing the brunt of that because we now see less tree canopy cover, we see less access to parks, and we see greater access to the health impacts because we don't have those things. And I think that's what I first got involved because I learned about the generations and intersectionality beyond the environment and how that impacts race. And I continue doing that work today because my ancestors said you need to keep fighting, keep moving forward, and never give up.
What really pushed me into raising awareness and being so what really pushed me into speaking up and being an environmental activist is because, well, I'm from Flint, Michigan, and Flint went through a very bad water crisis, and can't even sugarcoat it. It was straight up environmental racism at its finest, and I think we need more especially youth advocates fighting for environmental racism and just environmental activism in general, because it's really important to speak up about those topics because there's a lot of things going on, especially within our own communities and stuff, like dirty water or bad housing, this and that. It all stems from environmental racism, and that's what just motivates me, because I want to make sure that I get my voice heard, because I always say this, because it's not just Flint that has a water crisis. America has a water crisis, and it's really not talked about enough because people think, oh, well, just because, let's take for instance, let's say if you live in California. Yeah, California, super expensive state, whatever, yeah. But you would think, oh, we have clean safe drinking water. No, you actually should be checking your water levels because, pro tip, check your water levels because 9 times out of 10, your water isn't safe, and you should be getting that tested regularly. That's a really big deal. But people think, oh, high-end places don't have dirty water. No, check your water levels. There's a lot of places that have bad water. It's not just Flint, Michigan, it's Newark, New Jersey. There's, I can't list any at the top of my head right now, but just know that there is a lot, and once again, you should be checking for water levels. But yeah, that's what really motivates me to be an environmental activist.
So this question is for little Miss Flint. While doing some research about you, I seen a bunch of quotes, but one that really stood out to me was, as it states, you're never too young or too small to change the world. Never let any adults dull your sparkle. And if they don't give you a seat at the table, stand on it with a microphone. Do you feel like kids these days are still going through that struggle of getting their voice heard and like being able to express how they feel?
Yes, actually, because, you know, a lot of adults like acting like children, and you would think, oh, well, since they're acting like children, maybe they would listen to children, but that's not always the case. So sometimes you really do have to stand on the table with a megaphone, and, you know, you really gotta use your voice because, you know, people aren't gonna listen to you first try. That's just how it is. Like that's how it was for me. Like it was really hard trying to get people to listen to me because, you know, when I first started off, I was like real little, like really small. Like these people are not gonna listen to a little child. Well, you know, I met Obama and all that, so you know, people did listen, but. You know, that's not the main focus here. The main focus is the fact that adults don't like listening to the facts, and that's simple. And every time you call an adult out on their wrongs, especially political leaders and whatnot, they throw a temper tantrum because they don't like being wrong. And personally, I think that's a skill issue. Because, why are you acting like that? It was never that deep, like, take your L. But, you know, it's just like, you, like, seriously, like, you really have to use your voice. Every time I do one of these talks, I, tell, everybody that's, you have to use your voice because you never know who's listening to you. How do you think I am, how do you think, I don't even know how to phrase that. I'm not even going to say that, but just I'm not even going to try that. I'm not even going to try that. But, you know, just use your voice because you really don't, anybody could be listening. You just got to keep on, praising and running for what's right because, you know, as long as you're fighting for what's right and you keep on doing you, you're a change maker. You literally don't got to wait until you're an adult to be a change maker. You can literally be a change maker at the age you are now. Trust me, just use your voice and you got it.
That was amazing. All right, Jerome, I have a question specifically for you. So I saw that you have your own virtual reality, or you partner with your own virtual reality development company. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to a high school called Washington Leadership Academy, and they were all about how can we train young people and prepare them for the jobs of the future. And I joined the computer science club actually, and one of the things that I felt passionate about was how can we get people to understand empathy from a first-person perspective? Because I feel like a lot of people in Washington, D.C., especially lawmakers, they don't understand the livelihood of their constituents. It's like you'll have a guy from Maine or have a guy from Maryland, and they don't understand that an immigrant, a undocumented immigrant, still has a life. They still have a community they come from, and they have a struggle that they had to go through to get this, to be able to come to America. So I created a virtuality environment specifically about that, where I told the story of a 5-year-old migrant traveling from Guatemala to southern Texas, and the 2,000-mile journey that took. I told stories from Cancer Alley, Louisiana, showing that African Americans, we make up 78% of the pollution burden across this country, but we only make up 14% of the population. That's what Mari was talking about environmental racism, is that clustering of wherever you go, you see that pollution's all around you and it's completely unjust. And it was virtual reality to show that firsthand, where anyone from any community, it was a white senator who can't empathize with his black constituents because he's so out of touch. It's about making sure that they see that and they can't walk away from it. And I later on understood that virtuality wasn't the most accessible way, because you had to go to them, you had to put on a headset, you had to sit through an experience for 15 minutes, and then have to have a conversation with them afterwards. So I went into writing blogs on my high school paper about environmentalism, about the need for moral clarity when it comes to politics, when it comes to any sphere of serious development that's needed in our society. And I moved from virtuality to journalism to activism, and it was just because how can we get to the largest audience and how can we reach people where they are? Because a person can do a virtuality experience once a year and feel changed by it, but if you tell really compelling stories, and if you put your body on the line and you go out and say, hey, focus on this issue, this is impacting me and my community, that's how I kind of evolved from that. But I feel like it's really important to show that, for me, I didn't start as an extrovert. I was a computer nerd. I just sat in front of a computer for 8 hours a day coding. So I come from that background. So it just shows that anyone, if you have a passion in something adjacent like music or sports, that all can intersect for something for good, and every role you play in society can change the world just by your outlook and by your passion and by your drive to say, what can I do within my field to push society forward? And I started through virtuality, but I just moved on from there.
Thank you. Powerful. Mari, I heard you say during this panel how when you first started, you were very young, and it was also very hard for people to hear your voice and for you to get your voice out. We know that's completely changed from now. And then Jerome, I had the opportunity of watching a couple of your interviews, and you talked about, just the whole process of, how young people think about, environmental justice from time to time. I don't really agree with that. Young people might not always know that, but I guess my question to both of you are, what are some of the tips that you can share about how young people can get their voice out more? I know you kind of started it, Mari, but just into depth about that experience for you first starting out. 80 weeks, did you say 80 weeks with a sign? Yeah, that's perseverance, and that's a whole other level of endurance. So maybe share some tips with young people how they can get their voice heard, or how they can continue to persevere even when they're not originally being heard.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a few tips that I would give to anyone is just to be persistent. Your youth doesn't have to work against you by way of experience. It can be an asset where you walk in the room and have a sense of they know you're there because you're fighting for something greater than profit or business interest. You're fighting because you know that your future's on the line. And you know that you have something that you have to say that is urgent. I have a story where my science teacher was just telling us about an opportunity to go and testify in the Washington, D.C. Council for the Clean Energy Omnibus Act. It was an entire bill where the entire council was like, oh, the corporate lobbyists are just going to steamroll this, they're never going to have it, because it would make all DC buses free, it would make them run completely on clean energy, it would allow for locally owned energy sources where people in the community would own their energy, would be able to have a sense of kind of not being taken advantage of by legacy fossil fuel companies. And after 7 young people went down, myself included, testified for 7 hours, after multiple multi-billion-dollar companies said, oh, you shouldn't do this, we said, no, this is our future at stake. This is 50 years down the line, we're gonna have a community where, because you didn't stop your pollution, we'll have X amount of sea level rise, we'll have continued erosion of our communities, we'll have acidic forms of soil where we can't grow in our communities anymore. We can't have a sense of community solidarity because you've destroyed that for us. And by us saying that, it went from no one thinks it's gonna pass to 50-50. And they cited it was because of us. It was because of young people going in the room and saying, hey, enough is enough. And we did that the next weekend, and we raised our voice for another 7 hours, and it passed unanimously. Hey! Woo! That's for us. And that just shows the power of Gen Z is by using social media, using the people that you know, grabbing 10 friends, you can change that narrative just by showing up. And my tip is just to know that never doubt yourself, because when you're have a sense of kind of leadership within you, and just know that you're right, and have good mentors around you, like teachers or officials that are through innovative changemakers, it's that initial push that allows you to feel like you can do something. So I want to thank a lot of organizations like Innovative Changemakers. There was an organization called College Bound that inspired me to feel like I could make my voice heard. So I think it's really important to have that infrastructure in the community.
And then for you, Mari, the question of, thank you, Jerome. Just the question of what other tips can you give young people to help, make their voice heard?
Yeah. Okay, so social media, of course, because, we're Gen Z and we literally have the entire everything at our fingertips, because we have this, so it's kind of like, especially TikTok, like I promise you TikTok will probably be your best friend. I wouldn't suggest Twitter, X, whatever you call it now, because no, we don't do that over there. We leave that to them other people. But Instagram is really good too. I normally really use Instagram, but Instagram and TikTok are two really good platforms to really make sure you're boosting up your voice and stuff, because you can connect with other people that have the exact same things that you're fighting for too. So it's kind of like you guys can connect in a way, and it's really all about honestly, it's really all about mutual connections and mutuals in general, because that's genuinely how you get your voice out there, because more and more people start, coming towards you, you're gaining traction, boom, your voice is getting out there. And like I had mentioned before, you never know who can be watching or listening to you. That's why it's really good to use social media. Just keep on, literally, just keep on. A really good one, especially what I did, is hijacking hashtags. That's simply just say if you're fighting for clean water, say what I did, I was fighting for clean water, and we hijacked the hashtag Hamilton, even though dirty water, Hamilton, there's no correlation. That's hijacking the hashtag. That's initially how people started fighting more about Flint, because we used a trending hashtag. I'm so serious about that too. You really want to use that to your advantage for real, because that's another way to get your voice out there and get more and more people to listen to you. Another thing is protest. If there is protest, go to protest. Be peaceful. Because peaceful protests are good. But go to protest, because that's what I started out doing. I mean, shoot, snow was all the way up to my knees. I was standing out there with a sign. I was little, but I was fighting for clean water. Shoot, literally, protest. Go to city council meetings. That's what I started doing recently. Speak at city council meetings. That is another thing. Okay, that's another thing to get your voice heard, because you're speaking to city representatives and all that. People that are supposed to represent your city and whatnot. Make sure that just a little advice. You don't even gotta speak at all, bro. Just show up and listen. Just listen to what other people have to say, and see if you I don't know the word for it, but yeah, go to city council meetings, because it's really good.
This is a question for Jerome. Now that you're in the White House, at such a young age, do you feel like that's the only thing you're seen as, just being that young man in the White House, or do you feel like your voice is still being taken seriously? And I apologize, I'm trying to word this right. When you're around all those high representatives, do you feel like you're still taking that seriously as you were getting into that position?
Thank you for that question. So I joined the White House when I was 18 years old, so I was just entering college, and many of the other advisors were folks in their PhDs and in their 50s and 60s, so it was quite hard to get their initial respect that they're what is this person doing here, and what are they representing? And it was through, I think the first meetings were just really crucial to show. I don't work in the White House anymore. It was a position for the past, the Biden administration, specifically on their Justice 40 initiative to ensure 40% of investments go to Black and brown communities. But specifically during that process, I think a lot of it, for me, felt that I walk into a room and there are conversations being had about the legacy of impact, but But I think when you think about social change, it has to come from 3 different lenses. It comes from thinking about how do we rectify the past, but how do we build towards the future in ways that think decades and not just over the next 3 to 4 years. And I think that was really the challenge that I faced, is that a lot of the leadership in this White House and the White House that preceded the one that I was a part of and the one that we're in now, is that I think such short-minded in how can we get this vote, how can we work in a way that isn't even for the people, but just for private interest. And I think it was in coming from it with a totally different mindset and saying, well, what are we doing beyond that? I was working on the carbon management working group, where we were thinking about technologies and where you pump CO2 from the air right into the ground. And they were planning on doing it right in communities in Cancer Alley, Louisiana, where they wanted to put it right under the neighborhoods, right in their backyards, and that would contaminate the water sources, that would continue to, over generations, leak back up into the air. So it would cause a clustering of that same pollution right under their houses. And no one was thinking about, well, the problem has been solved now, we can just work on the next thing. But it was like, well, what are you doing to make sure that doesn't happen? And what are you doing to make sure that those pipelines that you're using to pipe that to the ground aren't leaking into those communities? And it was after the first working group set of recommendations we gave in October, through November and December, we saw already a leak happening in communities. We saw people dying from the fact that it was invisible gas that was impacting their lungs, and people died from it. And it was that learning lesson. They said, oh, even though you're 18, even though you're a young person, you still have ideas that are new, because I think it's about the unity between generations. Young people have that wisdom, that decades of understanding. And I think young people have that idea to come into a system and outside of the norms of thinking, oh, we've done it for so long in this one way, but how can we subvert that? How can we use new technologies like social media to rethink people to volunteer? How can we use new technologies like virtuality to educate people about these things? Young people can think about things outside of the same old things that have got us into the crisis we're in today. And I think if we're going to keep doing that, it was having more young people. I think for me, just being one young person in the White House, I was oftentimes speaking about things beyond environmental justice and about other issues. And I think we have to have more representation, because from one young person, we're able to get a lot done. But if we had 10 in an entire department that focused on young Americans, that would be incredibly beneficial. And I think the reason I got into the White House was because I made a real ruckus protesting there every single week, and they probably got tired of me making them look bad. But directly after that, we had a cohesive movement where at every presidential stop, young people showed up. It was for every single presidential candidate. We said, we're young people, this is what we want from you. No matter what you're talking about, these are the things that our generation needs. And it was that set of framework, it is always showing up, always being persistent, always being in their faces, that they were able to include us in those decision-making processes. And I think that going forward, we have to continue doing that as a community, in that we show that even on the state level, no matter what the federal government's doing, we can show that progress happens. It's by having people that you know in your community, empowering them to run for mayor, empowering them to run for local positions, and saying, hey mom, hey auntie, hey cousin, I know that you're really passionate in politics. Why don't you represent my generation and be in that position? Because we know that we've seen generations of people that just don't do anything and just hold up seats and hold up progress. And it's by us saying, hey, we can do that. We can change things. We saw that, I used to intern in Congress for Congressman John Lewis, and he was one of the most famous members of Congress. And he only got 10 calls a day. And as an intern, I used to tally up for the issues. It was climate for one call, it'll be for reproductive justice for another call, it'll be about racial justice for another call. We have to tally it up at the end of the week. And at the end of that week, for the next week, he would say, these are my priorities, based on the number of people that called. So if everyone in this room picked up the phone and actually said, I'm gonna call my representative today, that intern that would have been me years ago would have to tally up 10 different tallies, 20 different tallies, and say, for the next week, the representative's gonna have to do this. Because we showed up. Because if we're likely to call, in their brains, they're likely to vote. And I think that's what led me to see change happening, is that young people have thought about those things. Old people told us about those things. I'm not calling you old. I mean, elders, people from different generations. I mean, yeah, exactly, honestly. And I think it's that new way of thinking with those numbers of people that can mobilize us that really gets us into those places. I work in the White House, and we got over $1 trillion in investments to communities, $1.5 billion for specifically community infrastructure, like in Flint, Michigan. Oh, I'm running over time. I'm sorry, yeah, let me close this up. But yeah, that was my experience in the White House, and I would say that anyone who wants to get involved, you can go to public comment periods. If your young person is 18 to 25, you can get involved and do more things like that.
That's awesome. We'll give it up for Mari, little Miss Flint, and Jerome Foster. It's been an honor, it's been a pleasure to have your voice on.